Prithvi Shantirantarikshagam Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantif Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. We begin today on verse number 3 of chapter 6. Let's chant the verse together. Arurukshor Muner Yogam Karma Karanamuchyate Yogarudhasya tasyaiva Shamaf Karanamuchyate. For the sage who desires to attain to yoga, action is said to be the means. And for him alone, when he has attained to yoga, inaction is said to be the means. So in this yoga of meditation that we are studying, the first two verses emphasized the importance of working with detachment. That if I can work without being stuck in the desire for the results of the work, then my heart gets purified. Because only when my heart is purified do I become fit for meditation. So first two verses showed the vital importance. And this is important because in the popular mind, meditation is a kind of a buzzword. It has gotten so much associated with spiritual life that we tend to think, well, if I'm practicing spirituality, then I must meditate. Anything other than that is just work. Now, the reason the first two verses deal with work is to show that, like anything in life, meditation also requires certain fitness. If I practice it without being fit for it, I may be just deluding myself. I may be imagining that I am meditating, but I am just sitting there with closed eyes. And as I've said on some earlier occasions, and we will have a time to discuss it later on as well, really speaking, meditation is not something that can be done. If you want if you want to be accurate about the language that we use, then meditation is not something that is done. Meditation really is something that happens. What we can do is try to calm down our mind. We can make an effort to focus it on the object of meditation. We can try to keep all other thoughts, all other distractions out. All other things, these things we can try to do. And when we do this well, then meditation happens. So when we speak about doing, there is an idea that there is an effort involved. Now in real meditation, there is no effort involved. It's just like the example that is sometimes given is just like water from a higher level will naturally, effortlessly come down to a lower level. Exactly in the same way, when my mind effortlessly goes towards divine, then I'm in a state of meditation. As long as we are making an effort, that's good. Effort must be made. But as long as I'm making an effort, I'm doing something. And when this doing stops, In other words, when it becomes effortless, meditation happens. And so if you want to be accurate about the language that you use, you will not really say, let me go and do meditation. And many of the elderly swamis of our order, they often say, now it's time for me to go and sit. Because that's what we are doing. We are sitting. We are trying to think of God. And this is again something we'll discuss again later on. What we call meditation, most of us, is an effort to think about God. Now, meditation itself is not thinking. Thinking, the act of thinking, and meditation are two different things. And in a strict sense of the term, meditation begins when thinking stops. So it's like this. We know, to put it very briefly, we know God dwells in our heart. And those of us who are spiritual seekers believe that the divine dwells in our heart. So, okay, what do we do then? Well, we try to keep everything out. We sit motionless as far as it is practicable, and then try to bring our mind to the heart. Now, if God is there in the heart, we should have seen God, right? But we don't see God. We just see darkness. Now, what option do you have? Well, if you're not seeing God there right now, the next best thing you can do is think about God, which is good. But don't mistake thinking about God as same as meditating on God. So we keep on then thinking about God, which is good. So we hold on to that thought of the divine. And that thought can take a specific form. The divine can be a form of your Ishta, that form, that name, that ideal, which resonates with your own head and heart, which immediately reminds you of that infinite reality. Now, infinite, and it's a pretty abstract idea. God is all-pervading. And what most of us need in our present way the mind functions, we need something tangible to focus our attention on. And that tangible ideal then becomes our Ishtadeva, our chosen deity. It's with the help of that tangible, graspable in some ways, because it has a form, a name, a sound. That's what a mantra is for. We hold on to these tangible aids of the sound and form. And holding on to that, then we begin our journey to go to the formless. So form takes us to the formless. Name takes us to the nameless. And while doing all of this, we employ our mind. We have to use our mind and start thinking of the divine. Now, just as when you go to the ocean front, we see that the water on top is pretty disturbed. There are waves and ripples, and it's a lot of movement on top of the surface. Then you dive deep into the water. And as you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, when you say, if you become an expert diver and you can manage to go, say, deep down, almost to the bottom of the ocean or Lake Michigan or wherever, at the bottom, the water will be still, almost like glass. But all the ripples and waves, etc., are on the surface. Our mind is a little bit like that. Sometimes when we feel our mind is disturbed, our mind is like just filled with ideas, or I'm not able to calm my mind, the mind is like the big ocean. At the bottom of this ocean is this perfectly calm mind. And all the disturbance and everything is ripples are on the top. Now we must learn the art of diving. We must dive deep inside our own mind. That is why Sri Ramakrishna was very fond of that Bengali song, which says, dive, dive, dive deep down, oh my mind. And so when we are thinking of God, we are really trying to dive deep into our own mind. And at some point you will see that as I try to go deeper and deeper and deeper in my own mind, the thinking becomes subtler and subtler and subtler. And at some point, your thinking stops and seeing begins. So meditation is actually seeing God. It's like this, when your friend is visiting you, and you just say, let's have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. You sit across the table and you are able to see your friend, and then you drink a cup of coffee, enjoy your coffee and chat. When your friend is sitting in front of you, you don't say, okay, let's now close our eyes and just think about each other. There is no need to think about each other because your friend is right in front of you. Now, when do you have to think about your friend? When you remember your friend and your friend is far away or right not in front of you, then you say, oh, I've been so much thinking about you. Now, we think about someone when we don't encounter them, when we don't see them. So, why do we need to think of God? Because right now we are not seeing God. Now, when I see God, there is no need to think of God. And so it is seeing God, which is what meditation really means. And it is thinking of God that will lead me to seeing God. It's like this. Some people are fortunate, and the number of such people is becoming less and less, that who as soon as they lie on their bed, they fall asleep. That's some lucky ones can do it. One of our Swamis, who was actually a disciple of Holy Mother, he had that. Some of us used to say that's the mother's blessing. As soon as he would touch his head on the pillow, he would fall asleep. His name was Swami Gaurishwarananda. He came to Mother at a very young age. And so when he was in his 80s, and he was so childlike. And so when he used to say, he said, nowadays I'm not able to sleep so quickly. It takes about a minute. But that seemed too much to him. Now, what is our experience when it's time to go to bed, we fall asleep, and then some time passes, maybe a few minutes or whatever time, we're just turning and twisting, and then suddenly sleep comes. You don't exactly know when it comes, how it comes, but at that time, you just forget where you are. And then you are in sleep. Exactly in the same way, when we sit to try to think of God, and then just trying to repeat our mantra, focus on God's presence, and we are trying to think. And when that thinking becomes pointed, and just like the sleep comes unannounced, you never know when it's suddenly going to come, and you're going to forget everything and just going to go to sleep. Exactly in the same way, when you're trying to repeat your mantra, do your japa, focus, single-minded, at some point, you don't have to consciously stop. At some point, your thinking will stop, your repetition will stop on its own, and you will begin to see. That is what meditation is. And that is why doing is important. And that is why the first 2 verses in this chapter spoke about doing. Because doing is important, but doing itself is not meditation. And that is why it says, for the sage who desires to attain to yoga, action is said to be the mean. And here this action means, first of all, even before we sit for meditation, in order to be able to remove most of the distractions from the mind, we need to purify our heart. And purification of heart occurs through working in the spirit of yoga, karma yoga. So that is the means to attain to yoga. Here means concentration, one-mindedness, one single-minded focus. And for once we have attained to that single-minded focus, then inaction is the means, because then there is nothing much to be done. You are just in the presence of the divine. So both work and worklessness both have a role to play. A question that can come is, how long should I work and when should I stop working? And a simple thing for answer to that question is, keep working in a detached way, in the spirit of yoga. when the right time will come, you don't have to stop working. You don't have to give up work. Work will give you up. You can see that in Sri Ramakrishna's life. He was a priest in the Divine Mother's temple, and all of us who have read his life know how intensely hungry he was for God's vision. That intensity of longing for God, it's very rare to find. He had that, but he never had the kind of conflict many of us have. Oh, this doing puja in the temple is taking so much time. When will I meditate? There is so much work in the temple and no time to meditate. Or I would like to meditate more. Oh, this work is such an obstruction. He never had that conflict. When he worked in the spirit of yoga. And spirit of yoga really means then work itself becomes a kind of meditation. And when that state was reached for him, he didn't have to stop working. He didn't have to give up work. Work gave him up. He says, one day he went out to pluck flowers for puja, and he suddenly noticed that this whole world, this entire universe is one big altar, that the divine is pervading everywhere, and every flower plant is actually a bouquet of flowers on this big cosmic altar. And once he saw that it's already offered to the divine, it just seemed pointless to then pluck one flower and take it to another one small little altar. And so because he had that vision, he said, from that day onwards, I couldn't pluck flowers anymore. Not that he said, I'm not going to. He just couldn't. So that's what I mean by keep on doing work in a proper spirit, in a spirit of karma yoga. And when the right time comes, the work itself will leave you. So much of the conflict we have in our mind about work and worship, or work and meditation, or my secular commitments as opposed to spiritual life, all of these divisions can be removed. It's a very, very, very helpful section of the Gita is here. Verse number 4. Yada hinendriyartheshu na karmasvanusajjate sarvasankalpa sannyasi yogarudhastadochyate. When one habitually renounces all desires and is no more attached either to sense objects or to actions, then one is said to have attained to yoga. Yoga arudaha. It's like one has mastered yoga. When can it happen? When we can renounce all desires and we are attached neither to the sense objects nor to actions. And I've said this before, that what does renouncing all desires mean? I think last week we discussed this, that renouncing all desires really means not hooking on to these desires, not catching the desires. Again, I need to qualify that statement. Desires spring from the mental impression, the samskaras in the basement of our mind, in the unconscious part of our mind. And desires in themselves are neither good or bad. There are certain desires which lead to actions which can weaken us, and there are certain desires which can lead to action which can strengthen us. And so renouncing all desires, again, has to be taken in the proper context. I mean, for a spiritual seeker, there is a desire to realize God. There is a desire to excel. There is a desire to transcend my limitations. There is no need to renounce that desire. In fact, holding on to that desire makes it easier for me to renounce all other desires. So there is nothing personal against desires itself. It's just that certain desires, let's put it this way. desire itself is not the problem. It's what you do with the desire. In other words, a desire can either lead to an action or lead to no action. For instance, right now, in your mind, a desire can come. It will be great to have a cup of coffee. A desire has come. You are used to drinking coffee. There are lots of coffee samskaras in you, and they can get triggered in one way or the other, and a desire for coffee can come up. Now, if you enjoy coffee, if you think, it helps me become more alert, it will help me, well, you catch hold of the desire. And you catch hold of it, then it becomes a sankalpa, it becomes an intention, and then you go and fix yourself a cup of coffee or find a Dunkin' Donut or Starbucks and get your coffee. So the desire for coffee led you to action and then a result. On the other hand, a desire for coffee can come and you say, no, this is not the right time for coffee, or the doctor has told me not to take it, whatever is the case. If you find that the coffee is not good for you and still the desire can come because of the past samskaras, you can say no to it and it will not lead to action. So when it is said renounces all desires, it means renounces doesn't allow those desires which will lead towards actions which will make me weak, either physically, mentally, morally, emotionally. Those desires will not be transformed into actions. And other desires which will make me strong, either physically, mentally, morally, then those desires will say yes, and then they will lead to good action. So renouncing all desires really means only those desires which will weaken me. Now, desires themselves, as I said, can't be renounced per se. What you can do is, where your freedom lies is in deciding. You have a choice which desires you should allow to mature into actions and which desires will not mature into action. So there is where our freedom lies. One who is able to make those intelligent choices about which desires should be welcomed and which desires should be renounced, and who is attached neither to sense objects or to actions, such a person can be said to have attained to yoga. Verse 5. Uddharet atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva yatmano bandhuhu atmaiva ripuratmanaha. One should raise oneself through the self and never lower oneself, for the self alone is one's friend and the self alone is one's enemy. Now this verse, Swami Vivekananda was very fond of this verse. You will find in many of his lectures he quotes this. Raise yourself by yourself. Now the word self comes here twice. How can you raise yourself by yourself? In order for any action to occur, the subject and the object can't be one and the same. It's like this. No matter how strong a person is, that person cannot lift himself or herself. It's like this, if I'm strong, I can lift this, I can lift anything, but I cannot lift, I can jump, but that's not kind of lifting myself. So the subject and the object, they can't be one if any kind of an action has to occur. So, well, then how can you raise yourself by yourself? And a helpful way to understand this is that, well, everything is really one. We already see that it's already become many. So that's already been taken care of. We speak about oneness, but that's still an ideal. That's still something we would want it to be, or philosophically we say it's all one. But right now, our present experience reality is that there are many. Not only are there many outside of us, there are really many inside of us. At the very physical level, and this is not something most of us think about, is all the time, is that we may think, I may think, and most of all of us think like, well, I'm one person. But really, if you go at these microorganisms, there are already lots of bacteria and all that within us. All the digestive system, the breaking down of the food and so all of that. So there is a whole colony of living organisms within me. So long as they are good, helpful bacteria, I have no problem. Well, if they are unwelcome, problematic bacteria, then there is a problem. But there are, which is why illnesses occur. Even if there are no illnesses, there are still other organisms living within me. So in reality, we are not really one person, as we say. But that's not where I'm going. Even within us, we often speak about, when we speak about the human personality, we have become habituated to seeing the visible part of me as this body. This is me. But there is an invisible part of me. There is the mind. And within the mind, then, we have these different functions of the mind. We say, well, there is the intellect, there is the ego, and so on. Then there is the conscious mind, and then there is the unconscious mind. So there are subdivisions have already occurred within me. And when these divisions occur, and each part, if it's not in harmony with the other, then there's going to be a problem. Many of the illnesses of today are believed to be, most of them are psychosomatic in nature. When there is no harmony between the body and the mind, then there is a problem. Body-mind coordination, if it's lacking, then there is a problem. Now, the mind itself is not one unit. Mind itself, at the very least, we can divide it into the conscious. There is a part of the mind of which we are conscious, and there is a part of the mind of which we are not conscious. So there is the unconscious mind and unconscious mind. Again, if these two parts of the mind, conscious and unconscious, are at war, there is a problem. Much of the psychological conflicts and stress and anxieties that we have occur because the mind itself is at war. There is a war kind of, war sounds like a strong word, but there is a struggle. There is a tussle going on within us. And oftentimes we see that tussle when, we do speak about, oh, I'm conflicted. There are times when you are not sure whether you should do something or you shouldn't do something. And then we do say, a part of me wants to do it, a part of me doesn't want to do it. Again, so there is one part saying yes, one part saying no. If all these divisions now make sense, or we are able to accept, then it's easy to understand this. Raise oneself through the self. So there is some part of me. Okay, let me put it this way. Think about it this way. Let's say, as a spiritual seeker, you want to meditate, but you are also a baseball fan. As an example, and so you want to. If there is a game going on, you of course want to see it or be in touch with what the score is. And now let's say that there is time for your meditation and the Red Sox are also playing at the same time. So now there is this spiritual, that part of you which wants to hold on to this spiritual practice says, no, I must now go to meditate. And then that part of you, which is this baseball fan, it says, oh, meditation, I do it every day, I can do it some other time, let me go and watch this. So you see now, so there are these, and both are part of your own self. They are not some outsider, that's your own self. So now, which one will win will depend on which one is stronger. So raising oneself through oneself really means that that part of my mind which is tuned to the spiritual ideal tries to raise the rest of my mind which is not equally tuned to that ideal. So it's time for me now to do some spiritual reading, and some part of my mind says, oh, let me do something else. And so this is this, then the spiritual part should say, no, this is you, because you see, you can't say a part of my mind will go there and a part of my mind doesn't work that way. And so this is the raise oneself by the self means then the spiritual part would say, no, this is not the time. This is the time to do it. Just like a naughty child or a student who doesn't want to study, and the teacher would say, or a parent would say, no, you've got to do it now. So that is what raising the self through the self means. And if I'm not able to do it, if the other side wins, then I'm lowering myself. But the self alone is one's friend and the self alone is one's enemy. This is very, very important. So many of us are so busy dealing with our external friendships and external enmities that we don't realize that even our external friends and external enemies really originate from our own mind. We create friends and we create enemies. And our own mind, one part of my mind can become my friend and one part of my own mind can become my enemy. Now, who would we call a friend? How would we define a friend? If there is someone who always appreciates what I have done or what I do, we now would say, oh, this person is a friend. We are very close friend because this person is always encouraging me, always appreciative. But maybe not. Maybe not. I think, sure, of course, a friend will appreciate and that's great. But maybe there are things that I do or speak which really don't deserve appreciation. Maybe there are some things I'm stupid in some ways. And a friend, if that person is a real friend, will not hesitate to tell me, you are just being stupid. And I might get upset. No one likes to be told you are just stupid. But if my friend truly loves me, and then will say, no, you're wrong. It shouldn't be done that way. Even if it makes me mad, even if I get mad with the friend and say, you get out, I never want to see your face again. But the friend will still tell me the truth. That's a friend. But if someone says, oh, that person is being stupid, but if I tell that to that person, then that person will get mad, and I don't want to hurt the feelings of that person, so I'll just keep quiet, or I won't say anything. And you're still a friend, but not like a real friend, not like a close friend. Now so when you say someone is a friend or not a friend, there is a spectrum involved there, and we know that in our own lives. There are some people we would normally say are acquaintances, people we know. Then there are some kind of casual friends. And then someone will say, oh, this one is a very close friend. And then someone will say, oh, this one is my real buddy. So we do, even among friends, we do kind of categorize them. And a friend that like the closest friend would be the one who will tell me the truth, whether or not it makes me mad or angry or whatever. Now, on the other hand, who is an enemy? An enemy is not always one who hates me or who is always criticizing me. A person who praises me can also be my enemy. For instance, if something that doesn't deserve to be praised, an enemy would, if I'm doing something wrong and my enemy wants me to keep doing that thing wrong, then rather than tell me and correct me, the friend will say, that's terrific. You are so awesome. And we might, this person is so close friend of mine, this person is appreciating, but I'm doing something wrong. This person wants me to become more stupid. And so really that person is my enemy. So we'll have to kind of look at the subtleties of who is a friend and who is an enemy. And then now look at the mind. If whatever I do, if my mind finds a way to justify it, if my mind is always trying to tell me, you're good, it's not your fault, it's somebody else's fault, it's that person's fault, it's the government's fault, it's anybody's fault but yours. If that is what my mind always keeps on telling me, I think there is a problem. Because if I'm never wrong, if I'm always correct, then I shouldn't have been here. I should have been an enlightened being. I should have been the Buddha. Now, if I'm not the Buddha, then clearly I'm not always correct. I am mistaken. I do some things wrong. Why wouldn't my mind tell me? Why does my mind always try to say, no, you're okay, you're okay? So when will my mind become my friend? A mind will become my friend when the mind will appreciate the right things that I have done, and the mind will tell me the wrong things that I have done. The mind becomes my enemy when it appreciates or justifies the stupid things that I have done and gets upset at the right things that I have done. So our own mind can be our friend, our own mind can be our enemy. And as long as our mind has not fully become our friend, we need a trainer. And sometimes it's like when you get a puppy. If you're already a dog trainer, then you would know how to train that puppy. But most people who get a puppy, they would like to have a puppy which is very obedient and kind of loving and playing with them all the time. But that puppy will need training. And so then you go to a puppy trainer and say, can you please help me train this puppy? And once the puppy is trained, then it can bring you endless joy. The mind is like a puppy also, and it's training. If you don't train it, it can create real mess. And so the scriptures, the Gita, the Upanishads are the trainers for our mind. The Guru can be a trainer of our mind. The spiritual teachers, saints, lives of saints, the lives of incarnations, spiritual reading, those can be trainers of our mind. So if we receive guidance and training from these sources, then slowly, that mind becomes our friend. When the mind becomes our friend completely, then we don't really need external help anymore. That's when the mind becomes our friend and teacher at the same time. The goal of the external teacher is to awaken the internal teacher. Sometimes people ask, is it necessary to have a guru? And the answer is simple. As long as I need help, that help has to come from somewhere. If I can help myself, I don't need any external help. But if I'm not able to help myself, I will need an external help. It's like this. Why do people, nobody generally asks, I want to be a doctor. Do I need to go to a medical school? Nobody asks that question. We recognize, I need somebody to teach me how to do the job, right? Then once I become an expert physician, then I don't need to go to a medical school anymore. In fact, then I can even teach others. I can help others. Exactly in the same way, if I'm able to train my own mind, then I don't need any external help. So we don't have to hesitate to take external help, but recognize that external help is meant to make us strong, so that a time should come when we are able to stand on our own feet. I mean, when people go to therapy, for instance, what is a therapy? There are many different ways of understanding therapy. I just like to look at it as just renting a mind. It's like this, if someone's kidneys are not functioning well, what do? Well, they say, well, you'll need a dialysis. And I don't know much about medicine, but I understand that it's something like there is some external machine which does the work of what your kidney would do. So your kidneys are not able to do it on their own, so we use an external thing to do that. And in the meantime, do something to strengthen your kidney so that it no longer will have to depend. I mean, if it has to forever dependent on an external machine, then life can become pretty handicapped. But ideally speaking, we can take an external help and then use that to opportunity to then strengthen one's own resources, so that I don't have to depend on that external help any longer. It's like when we as little babies, when we want to walk, very rarely, except in mythological books, you don't see a baby simply immediately after birth just getting up and running. It doesn't happen. It takes time. And then even when a baby then will be crawling on all fours and then gradually would learn to walk, sometimes would need to take support of things, and then gradually would learn to walk without taking any support. Sometimes if there is a sprain in the leg or something, we might need to use a stick as a support for a while. But if I'm forever dependent on that walking stick, then I'm not really become strong. So the ideal is I shouldn't need any external help any longer. So I look at therapy like that yes, there is some conflict. There are certain things I'm not able to figure out. Ideally speaking, my mind should have been able to deal with it. Ideally speaking, every one of us should be our own therapists. Well, right now, my mind is not strong enough to deal with it. So I go to a therapist. How effective that therapy will be will depend on how strong that mind is. But essentially what I'm doing is, rather than processing that information in this mind, I will tell the therapist what the problem is and use the therapist's mind to do with it. So the success of it depends on how healthy the therapist's mind is. So I'm really renting the therapist's mind. Now, a good therapist will not only try to help me resolve the problem, but make me strong enough so that should the problem come again, I would be able to deal it on my own. But if he's a crooked therapist, the therapist will say, well, you keep on coming. And of course, then, and then once the commercial interests come into it, then the longer you keep on visiting a therapist, the longer the therapist gets an income. And so there is really a conflict of interest there, that if I make this person strong enough to deal their problems on their own, then I'm going to lose the patient. And so that's a real problem. Now, ideally, as I said, the goal, that's how it, that's why now, we do hear about preventive medicine. But if preventive medicine really works well, then the number of patients are really going to reduce considerably, theoretically at least. And that's really going to affect the whole medical profession. It all works because of the knowledge that most people are not going to follow the thing. And that's just the way things are. Now, in spiritual life, when we have a teacher, the goal of this teacher is to awaken the inner teacher, to make our mind strong enough so that I don't have to forever depend on an external teacher. And that makes sense, because the external teacher is not going to be around forever. um, no external support is going to be with us forever. And that's a hard truth to learn. Many of us don't want to think about it. As children, when we grow up, our parents are our support, our families are support, our the job can be our support, your wealth, your bank can be your support. So our life is built on these various layers of supports of people around us, the institutions around us, whether it's the banks or the business or the the social community, the spiritual community. All these are different layers of supports. But remember, all these are still external supports. Many of them will be with us for a long time, but don't depend exclusively on it. You don't have any control over these external supports. They can be taken away at any time. So the ideal is that I should learn to stand on my own feet. The sooner it happens, the better it is. That doesn't mean that you have to throw away the supports. The supports, whether you throw it away or not, one day are going to go away anyway. But that that's what freedom really means. That's what independence really means. That I can take care of myself. And that is what is meant here. And the self alone is one's friend. The self alone is one's enemy. So when my mind becomes my friend, then I'm approaching toward that state of independence, toward the state of freedom. So all of the spiritual practice that we do is really to transform my mind from being my enemy to being my friend. That's the goal. So we will stop here at verse 5. What are your thoughts or comments or questions about what we have discussed today?
Swamiji, you talked about these two parts of the mind, one which is closer to our spiritual ideal, and the second which kind of tends to prevent us from attaining to that. And we've referred to it in the past as the intellect versus what we call the mind in general. Like the mind is not easy to control, whereas the intellect knows what's best for the mind. But what my understanding is that the conscious part of the mind is the intellect in its essence. Is that how you would define it, or how do we understand the intellect, so to speak?
Intellect is not so much a part of the mind in as much as it is a function of the mind. So in Sanskrit they say, Sankalpa vikalpatmakam manaha nishchayatmika buddhihi. So that function of the mind which deals with the pros and cons, looks at the pros and cons, and that's called mind. It's a little confusion because mind we use as a generic term, but among all these, if you want to kind of find the different functions of the mind, then that function of the mind which just weighs all the pros and cons is the mind. Then that function of the mind which actually then determines nishchayatmika, nishchay, which then determines, yes, this is right, this is wrong, or this I will do, this I won't do. That function is the buddhi or the intellect. So intellect is not so much a part as a function. So the same inner unit, if you want to call it, the invisible part of me which is not physical, it does a lot of many functions. It has many functions. One function is to weigh all the pros and cons, to look at all the ideas, thoughts, etc. That is what the mind does. So that function which then makes a choice or takes a decision, then that function is called the intellect. Then that aspect of the mind which gives the sense of I, then that is called the ego. And then that function of the mind, which kind of is seen sometimes as a kind of a storehouse of all the thoughts, emotions, feelings, that is sometimes called chitta. Again, none of these are kind of names or functions carved in stone. Some people can just be satisfied with just the mind and the intellect. If you want to subdivide it further, then you can think about the storehouse of all this and the sense of I. So different people in different contexts have divided and subdivided these functions in different ways. And we can feel free to do it in our own way. There isn't really like this is right and this is wrong, except to recognize that there are, in our own mind, there are things which we are not able to decide, and there are times when we choose. So that choosing part is what the intellect does. Yeah.
So you talk about karma yoga and you talk about being independent. So those are the two different times in your talk. I'm trying to tie them together as a mother. So as a parent, when you have a responsibility to raise a child, how do you separate yourself from the need to support the child? You use the example as a bank or anything that we're dependent on that could go away at any time. So is it just a matter of acceptance that at any point in time that may go away, so make sure that you're not attached to that and you can find an alternate? Or is it that everything that you do should be done with a karma yoga idea where there is no attachment? You're doing even raising your child as out of love and your job out of love. So if you have money or don't have money, it doesn't really matter. I'm trying to understand how
The thing is this.
in raising a child and being responsible.
Yes, I think at every stage of life, we have certain duties. So when you have a child, then there is a duty of a mother to the child. And we have to do our duty in the best way possible. But also, it's not simply about providing, say, a material security. The duty of a mother is to provide the child with whatever the child needs, but the greatest gift that we can give to our new generation is an ability to stand on their own feet, an ability to understand the joys of life, but also the limitations of life. Because when we grow older, we are not, most of us, I don't remember a single toy that my parents gave me. I'm sure they gave many toys. I don't remember a single one of them. What I do remember today, even at this age, is some of those little things that they told me, which I say, oh, this is what my mother used to say. This is what my mother told me to do it. Or this is what I saw my father do. So those little things that we saw them, how they dealt with certain situations in life, or what they told me, those are the things which are my greatest assets now. Not so much the little things, how many times they fed me ice cream or took me to sea beach and gave me bhel puri. Those things will be easily forgotten, you see. So that's what I'm saying. So as a mother, we have to support our children, help the children, but help them along with these perishable entities, help them with this knowledge and understanding which will not go away, which will help them even if all other external supports are taken away. Yeah. Okay, so we will stop here today, and then next week we will begin with verse 6. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. So beginning next Sunday, our satsangs will begin. So the summer recess is coming to an end. So next Sunday, our satsang will be at 11, and the topic will be self-renewal. As always, though most of you have been coming all along, so you know what it entails. as usual, after the satsang, we'll have refreshments. There'll be informal discussion in the sitting room. So you're all welcome, and we look forward to a very productive weeks ahead. Beginning next week, our Tuesday and Saturday, not this Saturday, but beginning next Tuesday and Saturday, our meditation and Arati will also resume. And the Gita class, of course, we will continue as we have been doing throughout the summer. So that will be for next Sunday. Okay, so we'll conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving Being become manifest unto us. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May the Divine bless us all and fill our hearts with infinite grace and love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.